The Fury of Giants wing is the second wing in Aberrus The Shadowed Crucible raid. It is home to Zaqali, Rashok, and the Vigilant Stewart Zskarn. Very quickly going to describe how this guide is set up. The video is split into chapters for each boss. You can find them below. The first chapter will describe the boss fight mechanics and each of the important abilities. The second chapter will be role-specific duties. Assault of the Zaqali. This is a two-phase fight. Before engaging the boss, the raid needs to split into two groups, as the raid will have to split up to defend two platforms. The easiest way to handle this is odd groups go far, even groups go closest. Phase 1 consists of managing groups of adds, and Phase 2 is just the boss himself. Phase 1. The raid will engage the boss briefly. Once Warlord Kagni reaches 100 energy, he will jump away to a platform. Once he jumps away, the raid will split, going to their respective platforms. Adds will then begin climbing up the side of these platforms. The raid must stop these adds and not allow them to reach the door. The boss will use an attack that will cause rubble to fall from the ceiling. High movement DPS needs to grab this rubble and run to the edge of the platform where the adds are climbing. An action button will toggle, allowing you to throw rubble, instantly removing an add from the battle. While controlling the adds, the boss will continue jumping between both platforms. Once the boss reaches 25% HP, Phase 2 will begin. Phase 1 abilities. Warlord Kagni. Devastating Leap. At 100 energy, the boss will jump to the other platform. When the boss lands, he will deal damage in the area and send out lines, marked by swirly circles, that need to be avoided. Heavy Cudgel. This is the tank buster. It's a frontal cone attack that deals damage, applies a stackable debuff that increases damage taken by 15%, and causes rubble to fall from the ceiling. Cave Rubble. This is triggered by Heavy Cudgel. Rocks will begin falling from the ceiling. Avoid the swirlies. This also leaves behind rocks that can be thrown at adds. Phase 1 adds and abilities. These are going to be listed by their priority. The Magma Mystics. They cast Molten Barrier. This shields them and deals pulsing damage every 4 seconds. Every 4 seconds this shield is active, it buffs the Mystics with Molten Empowerment. Molten Empowerment is a stackable buff that increases fire damage dealt by 20%. Magma Flow. Randomly hits a raid member with a 15-second dot, needs to be dispelled. Lava Bolt. Deals damage to anyone hit, needs to be interrupted. Flame-bound Huntsman. They use Blazing Spear. This targets several players. Targeted players need to run to the edges of the arena. The Huntsman will throw spears at these players. Any players inside the ring will take damage. The spear will remain in the ground and then explode after a short duration. Obsidian Guards. They use Scorching Roar. Any player within 25 yards will suffer damage every half second. Zaqali Wall Climbers. They only melee attack, no special abilities noted. Phase 1 role-specific duties. Tanks. Grab the adds to keep them from reaching the door. Face the boss away from the rest of the raid. Use defensive cooldowns after the boss's second Heavy Cudgel. Healers. Expect heavy raid damage during Molten Barrier and Scorching Roar. Dispel players hit with Magma Flow. Grab rocks to help lower the amount of adds you're fighting. DPS. Your target priority should be Magma Mystics, then the Flame-bound Huntsman, then Obsidian Guards. Grab rocks to help lower the amount of adds you're fighting. Range DPS, help grab adds for your tank. Phase 2. This begins when Warlord Kagni reaches 25%. He will jump back to the original start of the encounter and channel a heal spell. The main mechanic here is to soak his Catastrophic Slam ability. If not done correctly, he will hit the barrier, causing barrier backfire to trigger. This deals massive damage to the raid. Phase 2 abilities. Flaming Cudgel. This replaces Heavy Cudgel. It's a frontal cone attack and applies a stackable debuff to the tank that increases damage taken by 15%. Tank swap after each cast. This also applies a debuff to every raid member that will explode, dealing damage to other close players, so space accordingly. Catastrophic Slam. At 100 energy, the boss will face the door and begin charging a shockwave. Have at least 10 players soak this attack, otherwise it will trigger a barrier backfire. Barrier Backfire. If the raid does not soak Catastrophic Slam, this deals a burst of damage to the raid and then will deal continuous damage every half second. This debuff does not expire and it stacks. Phase 2 role-specific duties. Tanks. Taunt swap after each Flaming Cudgel. Keep the boss facing away from the raid. Healers. Expect raid damage during Flaming Cudgel and Catastrophic Slam. Help soak the Catastrophic Slam. DPS. Stay behind the boss. Keep space until Flaming Cudgel expires. Help soak Catastrophic Slam. Rashok the Elder. This fight consists of two alternating phases. Phase 1 is the boss and his abilities. Phase 2 is triggered when the tanks move the boss to the center of the arena. The boss will gain energy during the fight. Moving the boss to the center of the room drains his energy. The boss's energy can only be drained 3 times, making this a DPS race. Phase 1. Rashok should be tanked around the room between the center circle and the wall. There are 3 main mechanics Rashok will use. Mechanic 1. Searing Slam. This will leave behind a lava vortex. These lava vortexes cannot be overlapped, hence the boss being moved. The second mechanic is Doom Flames, which will spawn multiple circles around the boss. This attack needs to be soaked, otherwise it will deal damage to the entire raid, one person per circle. The final mechanic is a Charged Smash. This is another attack that must be soaked. Use as many players as possible, as the more players in the soak reduces how much energy Rashok gains. The tank mechanic. When Rashok reaches 90 energy, he should be moved to the center of the arena to trigger Phase 2. Phase 1 abilities. Searing Slam. Rashok targets a random player. This targeted player should run to the wall. After a couple seconds, Rashok will jump towards that player, smashing the ground and leaving behind a lava vortex. This attack deals more damage for each lava vortex already present in the area. Lava Vortex. This is left behind after Searing Slam and will periodically send out lava waves. Every time Searing Slam is used, each active lava vortex will send out additional waves. Lava Explosion. This is only triggered if a Searing Slam hits a lava vortex. This will pretty much result in a wipe. Doom Flames. The boss will mark various locations on the map and call down missiles. If the missiles do not hit a player, it will deal damage to the entire raid. There should only be one player in each circle. This will also apply a dot to those players struck. Charged Smash. Rashok will charge and then smash the ground, inflicting massive damage and gaining 15 energy. This attack needs to be soaked by the raid. The more players inside the circle spreads the damage out and also lowers the amount of energy the boss gains. Shadow Lava Blast. This is a frontal cone ability that is aimed at a random player. All players should move out of the way. Wrath of Zskarn. This is a tank buster and it's a two-part attack. Flaming Slash is the first part of the attack. After the first hit, the tank will receive a debuff that increases Flaming Slash damage by 500%. Earthen Crush is the second part of the attack. After the first hit, the tank will receive a debuff that increases Earthen Crush damage by 500%. The boss will use Flaming Slash followed by Earthen Crush. After Earthen Crush, the off-tank should taunt, as the boss will be following that up with another Flaming Slash and Earthen Crush. Phase 1 role-specific duties. Tanks. Keep the boss between the center of the room and the wall, slowly moving him around the arena to space out the lava vortexes. Taunt swap after the boss uses the first Flaming Slash and Earthen Crush combo. Healers. Damage ramps the longer this fight lasts. Doom Flames will inflict multiple members with a dot. DPS. Single target spec build. Run to the wall if targeted with Searing Slam. Help soak Charged Smash. One person per circle for Doom Flames. Phase 2. When Rashok reaches 90 energy, he should be moved to the center of the arena. Once in the middle, he will have his energy drained by the Elders Conduit. On normal difficulty, this can only be done 3 times before it breaks. On LFR, it can be done as many times as necessary. While his energy is being drained, the entire raid will periodically suffer damage from Scorching Heatwave. Shadow Flame Fissures will also trigger. These radiate from the boss in straight lines marked by swirlies and are easily avoidable. Ideally, you want everyone to stay grouped up as much as they can to benefit from AoE healing. The boss can still be attacked during the phase, but ensure you're using defensive cooldowns to help with damage reduction. Phase 2 abilities. Scorching Heatwave. Rashok periodically inflicts Shadow Flame damage to all players. Shadow Flame Fissures. Multiple lines will radiate from the boss, marked by swirlies. This deals damage if any player stands in it when it erupts. Phase 2 role-specific duties. Tanks. Deal damage to the boss. Healers. Save cooldowns for this phase. DPS. Use defensive cooldowns to help healers, and watch your feet. The Vigilant Stewart Zskarn. This is a single phase fight that involves the main boss and the occasional adds. The overall goal here is to defeat the boss before the entire arena is covered in fire. The first main mechanic is dealing with Dragonfire traps. The arena is basically a circle that is broken into smaller sections in the shape of dragon scales. Each scale has an imprinted icon in the center. This is a Dragonfire trap. The boss will trigger 3 of these traps every 33 seconds. 2 of these traps will be right next to the boss and 1 will be spaced out. Once triggered, the trap will cover that scale in fire, and the raid will no longer be able to move through that scale without taking massive damage. This means that Zskarn should be tanked against the wall in a clockwise or a counterclockwise rotation, closest to the active traps. The idea behind this is to keep the center of the arena void of traps for ranged DPS and healers to stand. The second main mechanic. While rotating around the room, the boss will summon golems. These golems will ignore players and attempt to activate random traps. They need to be CC'd and killed before they activate additional traps. Once defeated, they drop salvage parts. Picking this up grants you a new action button, which allows a player to target and disarm an active trap. DPS should attempt to disarm any traps that are in the middle of the arena. If the middle of the arena is clear, DPS should disarm traps that are completely opposite of the boss, but not the ones against the outermost wall. The third mechanic. Tactical Destruction. At 100 energy, Zskarn will activate a certain number of dragon statues, starting with the closest. Once activated, they will engulf that side of the arena in deadly flames. The amount of statues the boss activates increases with each cast. Ideally, when the boss is close to 100 energy, you want him near the most active Dragonfire traps, as the raid will have to relocate to the opposite side of the arena to avoid the statue's explosions. The fourth mechanic is only on normal difficulty, Shrapnel Bombs. The boss will throw out bombs on the battlefield. After 30 seconds, they will detonate and cause massive damage to the entire raid. One person, ideally the off-tank, needs to run through these bombs to detonate them early. Utilize defensive cooldowns in order to reduce the damage. DPS with immunity cooldowns can also help with this. Zskarn's Abilities. Dragonfire Traps. The boss will activate the 2 closest traps to him and another trap in a nearby random location. These traps cover their scale in fire and deal massive damage to anyone that stands in them. It also applies a stacking debuff. Animate Golems. The boss activates golems that are attempting to activate additional traps. They must be CC'd and interrupted if they begin casting their Activate Trap spell. They can be gripped and knocked back. Tactical Destruction. At 100 energy, the boss will activate the closest dragon statue. This statue will begin using a cone attack that is deadly if a player is caught in it. The raid must move to the opposite side of the arena to avoid this. Each time Zskarn reaches 100 energy, he will activate 1 additional statue. Blast Wave. This is a knockback that applies a 6-second dot. Pay attention to where you're standing so you don't get knocked into an active trap. Just a side note, you cannot get knocked off of this arena. Shrapnel Bombs. This is only on normal difficulty. The boss will throw out bombs on the floor. These will explode after 30 seconds, dealing massive damage to the raid and applying an 8-second dot. Manually triggering the bombs by running over them will trigger the bomb to only damage that player. It still deals damage and applies an 8-second dot. The off-tank should break away from the boss and trigger each of these bombs. Utilize cooldowns for physical damage, not magical. Searing Claws. This is the tank buster. This applies a stacking fire dot that takes damage every 2 seconds for 20 seconds. Role-specific duties. Tanks. Keep the boss against the wall so that he activates the 2 closest traps. Move the boss to the next set of empty scales after the traps are activated. Taunt swap between 5 to 8 stacks of Searing Claws. At 100 energy, make sure you lead the boss away from the activated dragon statues. Off-tanks need to handle the shrapnel bombs. Healers. Position yourself near the middle of the arena. Expect raid damage during Blast Wave. Help the DPS disarm traps. On normal, expect big damage on the tank handling the bombs. DPS. Position near the middle. Control the golems and interrupt their trap activation. Disarm traps that are in the middle of the arena. So that's it, the second wing is down. I have guides on other bosses and wings on my channel. Like this video for support and subscribe if you want to be notified on future guides. Also check out my new podcast if you want to just listen on honest thoughts about the current state of WoW. If you want to show extra support, my channel memberships and Patreon links are down in the description. I'll see you in the next one. Bro, please give me a tier piece. Thank you, Jesus Christ.